to our comments. That's going to be very important to us, and I think it will be very important to you as well. So look forward to tomorrow night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dan Lasky, 23 Skyline Drive in Saco. Got a couple of things. I just want to mention on the ecology school. I want to follow up on Inga Brown's comments. I'm in full agreement with everything she had to say. If I own a business and I come to you, and I guess originally when I agreed to do this project, it should be, and I agreed to, paying for the left-hand turn lane. All of a sudden now I don't want to. We're not setting a very good precedence, and I don't believe we should be doing that. I have 3 children. All 3 went to the ecology school, and they all had a great time, and I think they do a wonderful job, but this is a totally separate issue. Secondly, on the grievance petition, why are you playing games, Mr. Mayor? This is not a NIMBY issue. This is, as Bill Caney had just said, legitimate, very legitimate concerns. And it didn't get posted. And I honestly, I don't know why. I mean, people are approaching me in town saying, how can this happen? In the city of Saco, how can this happen? They're all thinking, you folks, mainly the planning board, doesn't listen to us. You're supposed to be representing us, not me, the citizens. And they were asking what's going on. We need to put, if it's some dirty laundry, put it out, let it air, and we can deal with it. We need to just address it so we can move forward in the proper manner and address things going forward the way they should be done. Not the way they have been done and the way they are being done to this point. I'll be speaking more on this tomorrow night, but I'm really, myself and others, I'm speaking for myself here, just very, very disappointed. We're better than this. We literally are better than this. And no one's looking to defame anybody, to harm anybody. We want to make things right. We all love the city of Saco. It's a great town. I'm very, very happy to live here. I've lived here for over 60 some odd years. We just need to be doing a better job and take the citizens seriously. Listen to them. Hear them out. Understand them. That's the main complaint people are coming to me. There's a lot of people in my neighborhood who come to me and want me to speak because they're not going to be coming here to speak. But I'm speaking just for myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's any other member of the public that would like to speak before the council, please come forward and be heard. With nobody seeking recognition, moving on from public comment to item 7.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Brochu, 257 Buxton Road in Saco. Just wanted to take a moment to kind of touch base on one of the agenda items this evening for the ecology school and the BPI funding or process. And just would like to hope that we take a very close and analytical look at this. Having been involved in the 2 extensions, or at least the first extension of the turn lane, due to some economic downtime and COVID, which was understandable. The thought was that they were continuing their condition of approval and would be building the left turn lane. And I know there's a lot of great things that come out of the ecology school, a lot of great visions, a lot of great concepts, a lot of awareness. And you hear about sustainability and our earth and our planet, how we can change what we do to be more sustainable. All very valid points. But there's also the other side of sustainability, which is financial sustainability that we would need and we manage in our businesses and in city government. So I would ask you, if you're going to consider, as you consider those, to think of all the taxpayers as a whole, that we're not bearing the burden of the cost of something that was part of the condition of approval when they first started. Whether you think it's appropriate that the city files on behalf of the applicant and there's a fee that's paid for the city staff time for that, or if they just do not participate at all. I would like to see those as the two options, so that there are no additional tax dollars going to this. We've welcomed them into our community. They've done a beautiful job. They've continued to grow. They've added over 100 acres of land, which unfortunately comes off the tax roll more than likely. They'll choose to be tax exempt. So as host citizens, as our host community, we are contributing to their success already. I'm just hoping that we don't have to go and additionally pay for the construction of this turn lane. I just hope you keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last call for public comment. Moving on to item 8. Excuse me, item 7, approval of the minutes for September 11th and September 18th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on the minutes? Roll call on the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the minutes. There's no consent agenda this evening under item 8, so move right into item 9, action items. Item A is a second and final reading, LD 2003, housing ordinance revisions assigned to Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City Council hosted housing workshops on February 27th and June 12th to discuss ordinance revisions that would be required to comply with LD 2003, an act to implement the recommendations of the Commission to increase housing opportunities in Maine by studying zoning and land use restrictions. The purpose of this set of ordinance revisions is for general compliance with LD 2003. Planning staff has shared these proposed revisions with city staff, the Planning Board, and the Long Range Planning Committee. The Planning Board hosted its public hearing on August 15th, and its report was provided during the City Council's September 11th public hearing. Be it ordered that the City of Saco hereby ordains LD 2003 housing ordinance amendments as presented to the following sections of the City Code of Ordinances. Chapter 230, Table 3-3, Permitted and Conditional Uses. Section 230-402, Dimensional Requirements. Chapter 230, Article 7, Performance Standards for Updates to Accessory Dwelling Units Provisions. Chapter 230, Article 7, Performance Standards to incorporate affordable housing developments, provisions, and renumber sections of that article. Section 230 through 1001, Off-Street Parking, and Chapter 230, Article 21, Definitions. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Gunn, second by Councilor Johnston. Discussion? Councilor Hatch, then Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I have gone on record as asking this council to consider, in the spirit of fairness, the ability to include the LDR in the series, actually, of affordable housing-related changes to the ordinance. That being said, I've had the privilege of listening to the public here in the council forum, and I attended the planning board meeting in which the public was allowed to speak, and I saw the deliberations between the planning board members. And I appreciate the public's willingness to step up, the willingness to express their concerns. I'm trying to remain open to them. I will let you know that they have impacted, to some extent, my position on this. But I do want to take a moment to remind everybody why we're at this point, and it has to do with the comprehensive plan being quite clear about promoting affordable housing options in all areas of the city that are serviced by sewer and water. Now, the public made a very compelling argument, at least in my mind, about the uniqueness of the LDR. So I spent a great deal of time thinking about that. And as I went back through the ordinance itself, and I tried to reflect on the comments that were fairly consistent given to us in terms of opposition, and the header of the communications was a vote no to permitting multifamily housing in LDR zones. The fact of the matter is that the control of that ship has sailed. The state has basically mandated through the LD 2003 that we at least have 2-unit buildings throughout the city, and that's a multifamily housing option. So there's nothing that we can really do to prevent that from happening. That was a state legislative mandate. And then there was concerns about resource protection, which I understand. That is a factor in that area that is not impacted in most of the other one other area of the city that has similar issues, but not as pronounced as the LDR down near Camp Ellis. But we have to remember that we have a zoning ordinance in place to protect us from these things. And there is a chapter 230, Article 8, that talks about resource protection, and that it would be, it's up to the planning board to marshal the ordinance, but they would not allow, in my opinion, a multiple development to impact the resource protection area, because it is in the ordinance itself. There are protections in the ordinance. If we look at the dimensional chart that's already in the ordinance, which we're not even proposing to modify, this protection for the zone, there was a comment, and I'm hearing it, that there should be certain areas of the city that should be worthy of perhaps more protection than others, and I wouldn't disagree with that. But if you look at the dimensional standards that are already in the ordinance, that are not going to be affected by this change, the LDR is actually, in terms of issues like minimum lot area per dwelling unit, minimum street frontage, it does already achieve a level of preference over the other zones in the city. It takes 10,000 square feet of lot size in the LDR Seward to create 1 unit of housing. It's in the ordinance now. The next closest zone has to have a minimum of 7,500. So you've already got built into the dimensional standards protections for the LDR. So, you talk about accessibility, and I get it. You don't have regular transportation, but many of the zones in the city of Saco don't. B-Sub Transit does what it can with limited staffing resources and finances to create these core routes, but many of the areas of Saco don't have direct access to regular public transportation, and that's an issue that's being worked on. We have pedestrian safety. We have, the statement was we have one busy two-lane access road, spotty sidewalks, and no bike paths, no shoulders. I get the two-lane you have one busy road. I don't dispute that at all. I've been down that road many times. But spotty sidewalks and no bike paths and no shoulders are plaguing many of the areas of Saco, probably less so than what you're experiencing. So I tried to be really open-minded about the comments, and again, I do appreciate them all. But I also want to be respectful of the fact that sharing the burden of affordable housing that was placed on us by the state is a responsibility for all of us to embrace. Now, if you were to build under the LD 2003, I got to get my dimensional standards here. If you were to build an affordable housing unit, which in your case, if I get the math right, you got single family and two family permitted uses in that zone. So 2.5 times density for one family is 2.5, and I'm assuming we have to round down, so that's 2 units, and you could add an ADU, because that doesn't count, if I understand the ordinance correctly. So that's maximum of 3 units. Or if you had a duplex, you could do 2.5 times, which would be 5 units. You can't add an ADU to a duplex, if I understand the ordinance correctly. So you're effectively looking in this zone, if we only put permitted use on the line that says affordable housing development, put a P there, I'll forget the recommendation I made for the larger units. I had originally suggested a permitted use for affordable housing and a conditional use for the 2 multifamily choices. I'm willing to dispatch with that, but I just think in all fairness to the rest of the city and its citizens that we should at least keep permitted use for affordable housing in the chart, and I'm going to make that as a motion to amend the first bullet point, which was Chapter 30, Table 3-3, Permitted and Conditional Uses, to include affordable housing development as a permitted use in the LDR.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilor Hatch, second by Councilor Johnston to add affordable housing in the LDR. Any discussion on the amendment only now? So we're not talking about the main motion, but we're talking about just the amendment. Councilor Berman.
I just want some clarity on Councilor Hatch's assertion. My understanding is that on a house with no units currently, you could build between 2 and 4 units, and the affordable housing density bonus would multiply that by 2.5. So I'm wondering if the city planner could weigh in on what the affordable housing density bonus would do to a current lot with no current units on it in the LDR, just as a point of fact.
Planner Prescott, thank you for joining us. Did you hear the question correctly?
Can you just repeat it, just to make sure I have it?
Yeah, thank you. In the current LDR, on a lot with 0 current units, under LD 2003, what's the maximum number of dwelling units that could currently be built, and how would that change with the affordable housing density bonus?
So any lot that's eligible right now for vacant, if it's vacant, I think we're saying up to 2 units on a lot. You could also have an accessory dwelling unit with that, so total of 3. And with affordable housing development, we have not differentiated between multifamily, subdivision, anything like that. So once affordable housing development is on the books, the way that I interpret it is that you would then be eligible to tap into the density for that lot, which is based on the lot size per dwelling unit, which I think is 10,000 square feet, as Councilor Hatch mentioned. I can confirm that if we need to. So then it's 2.5 times that, whatever's allowed on that lot. So in the case that I believe Councilor Hatch mentioned, if it's 20,000 square feet, it's normally 2 units, so it'd be 4.5, 4.
And the accessory dwelling units creates a 3rd unit, but that doesn't get multiplied by 2.5?
The accessory dwelling unit, no, that does not get multiplied by 2.5.
So you just have a maximum of 4 units.
Yes, but this is going to change depending on the lot size that you have. So if you have a larger lot, then you can add more units. And tap in the 2.5 times base density.
Right. So
If you add that.
If you had a 40,000 size, square foot size lot, you could then build 4 dwelling units, and now it would be 10?
Yes, I'm just using my calculator.
Thank you.
Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Dorn. So I need a clarification. So that 10,000 per unit is not a standard fixed limitation. So if you have a 2-unit property, a 2-unit building on the property, and you want to take advantage of the affordable housing benefit, so 2.5 times would be 5. Don't you need a lot that's got a 50,000 square foot footprint?
So we're getting into scenarios, and yes, you're right. My mistake is 5.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So that's over an acre. That's
But we're getting into different scenarios here,
Right.
so I think I'm being asked 2 different questions. So I just want to be really clear with the question, that I'm answering the question I'm being asked. I'll leave the calculator out so we don't get into issues with 5 versus 4.5.
Thank you. With the affordable housing density bonus, that does not affect the minimum size per dwelling unit.
It might be helpful, if it's okay with the council, if I pull up the table currently as it sits today.
So if you have a 2-unit, you have 20,000 square feet, 10,000 per each, and that's all you have in the lot is 20,000. 2.5 times that is 5. You do not need 50,000. That 20,000 can have 5 units on it. That is the affordable housing. If you're just adding dwelling units under the single-family part of this, then you do have to have 10,000 for every building you put on that one. It's the density bonus for the multi-affordable housing that you do not need extra land for.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's assuming that's correct, our code enforcement officer Toomey is correct, that's exactly my concern. And that's why I'm concerned about the affordable housing density bonus in the LDR. I'm on the record as loving affordable housing. I think it's critical. I think we need it. My understanding of the literature is what you really want is about a 10% density of affordable housing. About 1 in 10 units in every neighborhood should be affordable housing. And I'm a big fan of inclusive zoning for that reason. It should be spread out throughout the city. But I'm afraid this doesn't do that. My lot is 2/3 of an acre in my neighborhood, right, about 30,000 square feet. If we could build 3 units on that now, and that would then be 6 or 8, that would cost 7.5, 7. That would cause chaos to my cul-de-sac. It's a cul-de-sac. Right, there are spots in the LDR where that might make sense, but not throughout the LDR. We're taking a sledgehammer to do the work of a scalpel, and that's exactly my fear. The spots that could have them should, maybe contract zones or future zoning would allow that. But just to reiterate some of the things we've already heard, there are no places to buy food. There are no places of employment. There are no medical services. There are no social services in the LDR. Those things just simply don't exist. The Ferry Road shares the characteristics of many roads in our town in that it has no sidewalks and no shoulders, but it's also the only way in and out. Every house you build drives on that road, without exception. Right? Now, we can and have to have more housing. I'm for that. We can and have to have more affordable housing. I'm for that. ADUs are a big part of that in the LDR. We can and should keep looking at where housing belongs, where affordable housing belongs, and we should do it in the LDR where it's appropriate. But fairness is the wrong word. Appropriateness is the right word. Right? We need to put the right types of developments in the right types of places in this city. Our comprehensive plan and zoning lay that out. We'll have a point to revisit those tools. I think that what today is our LDR may be a few zones in the future. Right? It's not the same problems, don't face the whole thing. And some of those may allow more growth. Some of those, right, should allow these kinds of projects. But it simply can't be for this amendment, assuming that, right,
Yes.
that density bonus is correct.
Thank you. Emily, do you want to weigh in on what you've brought up or explain what you've brought up for the council and for the benefit of the audience?
Sure, thank you. This is just from our current dimensional standards table, 4-1, the low-density residential zone. I've just zoomed in here for you. So it's 10,000 square feet minimum lot area per dwelling unit, just as Dave was calculating for you.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarifications.
So council, on the floor is an amendment to add affordable housing in the low-density residential. It was put forward by Councilor Hatch, second by Councilor Johnston. Any further discussion on the amendment only? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So, again, I seconded the motion because I appreciate the conversation, which really, from the outset of this topic, had been my goal, whether it was affordable housing or types of land use, multifamily, as I guess we're terming it. But I think I also said it at the outset of this, that this particular conversation specific to the LDR, I viewed as a much larger conversation than just the LD 2003. And that's what's before us. So I have taken the approach specific to just this, with hoping to have the discussion about not just the LDR, but I could give you other zones that, given, all the comments by the public, valid comments, as other councilors have said. As I've stated, also, I can apply that to almost every single zone, largely, almost every comment. And so I think that, from my perspective, a decade or about a decade here from council, I think growth has been the challenge that I've repeatedly heard. And often, people are only concerned when it impacts your neighborhood. Yet, all these neighborhoods are impacted. And that's the problem. And again, I'm not trying to throw a square peg into a round hole, but when you look at, as I've sat on several comp plans, zoning ordinance revisions, where you see the same comments over and over about locating housing, specifically where current resources or services are. And the Ferry Road, in particular, has had these services at the latest point, I think, was 1990 when they completed most of the sewer work down there. The pattern of development has just remained single family. Meanwhile, when we talk about resources, and I hear this, most of my adult life, I've watched the city grow on the other side of the turnpike, which is, again, valuable land resources that doesn't have any of the services that the Ferry Road presently has, the vast majority of it. And so as we've expanded in this outward growth we're kind of at, I mean, we've seen it. Look at Jenkins Road. We're now spending millions of dollars to put a traffic light in. That street in particular does not have a full sewer yet. The way it's trending, it will, and there'll be hundreds of units out there too. So I've always looked at, you know, I hate terming it the ferry road because it's really not. The LDR actually has two other areas of the city that fall into it. But I guess, you know, it makes sense why people would view it as just a ferry road. I think this is a topic we need to come back to. That's what I'm really overall getting at. I've said it before, whether it's including triplex or fourplexes, I certainly have never envisioned, you know, what we have across the street from us here at all. So just being able to collaboratively as a community figure out how we can make these things work is my long-term goal here. And I guess with that, that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston, just so I'm clear, you wanted to revisit this at a time down the road. Are you withdrawing your second?
We can vote it down. I meant the topic as a whole, future councils, I would hope, would take up.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Councilor Hatch.
Yeah, I would just like to personalize, if I can, because Councilor Berman chose to do so. My house is in a MDR zone. I have a cul-de-sac at the end of my street. And I'd like, Mr. Toomey, if you could correct me if I'm wrong. My lot is approximately 6/10 of an acre, so 6/10 of an acre. So we'll go 25,000 square feet, if just around. So I can get 5 units, and 2.5 times 5, if my math is correct, 12 and a half.
You have 12.
Yeah. And I can get 12 units on my cul-de-sac,
Yes.
with all due respect. All right? And everybody on my street that has the same approximate lot size would have the same dynamic. And I'm okay with that if that's what I have to have, but I just have a problem where it's not applicable everywhere. All right? Thank you.
Further discussion, Councilor Gunn, then Councilor Archer. Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, while you're here, thank you, Emily, for all your work you've done on this. I know this has been practically Yelman's work to receive a decree from down on Augusta, but as I've pointed out to everyone, the fact that Saco has made it a point to be very proactive in relation to other communities. She did not have to burn the midnight oil completely on this, so I appreciate that, but still, thank you for your hard work on this. I do appreciate it. Circling back to Councilor Hatch's, I think, first comments, I've kind of lost track at this point. I've been having discussions about this with many people, trying to wrap my head around it, and whether you want to say it's either fairness or appropriateness, however you want to slice it. My approach to going above and beyond just to complying with LD 2003, which is what's on the table right now, the amendment notwithstanding. If we start to push it a little even further, that will put us in a more proactive position where the next time we have a decree from Augusta saying, look, it's been 10 years, it's been 15 years, we really need to do X, Y, and Z to get affordable housing going. Because right now, all we're doing is pretty much putting the parameters in place to allow it to happen. Given Ferry Road, Route 9, however you want to term it, it does take a while to get down there just in terms of just the logistics, as opposed to the new development that we've seen on the north side of the Turnpike. There's no guarantee the development's going to go there. If anything, it's just going to ensure fairness by having on the book that it's a possibility. And to anyone who's afraid of the potential for way too much development down there, I'm just going to look at just the practicality of having that type of development down there and pointing to such things such as dimensional standards, environmental concerns by the river, by the forest, that even though it would be a permitted use, those other parameters, in my judgment, take it for what it is, I see it as almost as like a de facto version of a conditional use, though, because whether or not you have a bonus or not, if there's other factors that prevent you from, building something rather large or inappropriate in a place where it really doesn't go, that's why we still have a planning board for things like that, and I don't think those things would fly, though. So in terms of overall fairness, I see this as a way forward. Now, to Councilor Johnson's point, I was personally hoping myself for just a straight up or down vote on LD 2003, because, yes, it is quite of a sticky wicket to get into the low-density residential of how we're going to go at it, but at the same time, in terms of what Councilor Hatch has proposed tonight, and with his modifications, just to get whether it's to get the conversation going or as a matter of fairness, I'm inclined to look that way. And as I said, we can always modify it later. So that's how I feel on things. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm looking at LDR for my ward because what abuts the highway in Ward 1 is both WR and LDR. And I'm trying to really get an understanding of how many properties this would actually apply to, because I'm looking at the the zoning map that we have, and it does put pretty good lot lines, correct? If I look at them, they're relatively accurate, not to the legal definition or anything. And I was just wondering how many would this actually apply to, because we still have the other setbacks. That still applies. We have all these other rules that still apply when I take into consideration the 30-foot setback. So when you have 20,000 square feet, if we just made it a quick box just for exploration purposes, and I won't hold you to it because I know it's on the spot, but if it was a 20,000 foot perfect square, one unit, right in the middle, like most, or 2/3 of the way back, like most houses that I see in our city, how many disqualifiers do we have with our current properties? And I know you don't know, I'm just trying to get a good understanding of like, how many would this actually apply to of the lots, not just in my ward, but all LDR? Because you'd still have to have your rear and side setbacks. You'd still have to have your front setback, your rear foot. You still have to have your street frontage. All that good stuff doesn't disappear just because of, it just kind of gives you the max times 1.5, if I understand the math right.
2.5.
2.5, sorry, that's what I meant to say. Do we have an estimate of how many this would apply to? A lot? Not some? Little? I know my ward would be different, but then my ward also, when I look at this, only applies at the 40,000 foot, because where our LDR, I don't believe any of it's sewered.
Would you like
Please.
us to address that?
Please.
So if affordable housing developments are allowed in LDR, it would apply to the Seward areas once we get into multifamily, and planning board review would still apply to those projects that trigger subdivision review. But keep in mind, people could put units inside homes too, so you can get more units within a structure that exists. You still have to have the lot size, but.
So it would apply to many of our current lots. It would apply that it's likely that they could do it, or is it more unlikely because of all these other limitations placed on homeowners, or the landowners, I should say?
It's likely that we'll see more development. We do not have a hard and fast number on what that is right now. We've been told just in our desk that 2.5 times is not enough to make some of the numbers work, to deed restrict something for 30 years. But I think we'll definitely see a slight uptick in accessory dwelling units. We have not seen one since permitting, but I think the word's getting out there about that. I would not be surprised if you saw a little bit more on the accessory dwelling unit side to begin with than on the affordable housing development side. However, on larger lots where affordable housing developments can go, if the number of units is there to build out to make the numbers work for developers, we could very well see some larger developments.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything?
Thank you.
Councilor Johnston, then Councilor Berman.
Thank you. I was just going to add, and I think the city planner kind of hit upon this. The market's going to dictate the affordable construction. I mean, reality tells me that the land value, given the current market down the Ferry Road, is way too valuable for a developer to come in and put affordable housing when he can sell, you know, a home for $1 million that I'm seeing now. But I will add, and I've stated this previously, that the LDR currently allows a senior housing density bonus, which really, it doesn't differentiate between affordable senior, it just allows senior housing, which I've always considered right in line when we talk about not having transportation. Well, most seniors don't have that, as do most lower income people. So they're comparable, and that's why I have viewed, you know, the use as something that potentially in probably more of a segmented LDR, which is something I advocated for going back to the comp plan and the zoning ordinance revision. That's probably the more appropriate path forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like, well, to recognize the comments of Councilor Hatch and Councilor Johnston, and I agree with much of what they said. We chose to create really large zones as part of our last zoning process. Again, we probably have more than 6 residential districts in the city that have 6 different sets of needs. I would welcome a workshop and understand how and where these fit in and how and where we want to encourage some growth, lots of growth, multifamily buildings versus not. And there are certainly places within what is currently the LDR on Ferry Road where some of those types of developments, right, would be both desirable and sensible and appropriate. In addition, I would like to see additional services in what's currently the LDR. I would like to see some businesses, I'd like to see some places for food and some commercial development that I think could offset some of these concerns over time. I think a comprehensive look at where we want development, where we want affordable development is absolutely appropriate. And I think those conversations are overdue, and an affordable housing overlay, a density overlay, redoing some of the current zoning would make a lot of sense.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment, on only the amendment? On the amendment only, roll call vote. Council Archer?
No.
Councilor Purdy?
No.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
No.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
No.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
Motion, the amendment fails. Now back to the main motion, not amended. Main motion, not amended. And Councilor McPhail, you had your hand up on this. We didn't get to it because there was an amendment. Do you want the floor back?
No, I was going to reiterate what Councilor Gunn said, and I was just going to thank Emily and her staff and David and Codes. This is not a small undertaking, and to the point that we're at now, the public workshop that was handled, I attended, was very impressed with the way that it was handled with the panel that you had. I think a lot of residents left with questions answered, which is always a good thing. And there's going to be a lot more going forward, but I think we've got a good first step grasp on it. And just wanted to thank everybody involved.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the main motion? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, I got to review my notes here. So again, I really thoroughly appreciate the matrix you created. I found that very helpful during this process to understand exactly what we're changing and why we're changing it. I did review the planning board packet, or what they weighed in on, and I saw that they had favorably voted in some of the things I had previously suggested. However, if I'm reading this correctly, I had brought up the question of whether or not multifamily residential projects more than 8 units, well, I was advocating for them to be added to the GB, or the general business zone, and allow ADUs in that zone. Were those discussed by the planning board?
Yes, they were. If you give me a quick minute. So to answer the second question, I believe, if I may,
The ADUs?
relative to ADUs and general business district. The planning board looked at it as what is allowed for single family, and single family is not an allowed use in GB. And so there would be no use to make an accessory to, was
Correct.
the theory.
Right, so they did away, well, we previously removed single-family as a use out of that zone, but there are several current that I'm aware of, so I just felt we should afford those property owners the same opportunity. Going forward, a single-family home can't be built by the zoning ordinance, so it's essentially just, I think there's 3 that I'm aware of, but I just thought we should give that opportunity to those property owners if we're giving it to every other property owner in Saco or thereabouts. Did they discuss the multifamily residential projects more than 8 units
For which one?
for a general business?
I would have to go back and listen. I'm not sure if we discussed that one.
All right, well, I would move to amend Table 3-3, permitted and conditional uses, as follows. Accessory dwelling units as a permitted use in the GB, and multifamily residential projects more than 8 units as a conditional use in the GB or general business zone. For those unaware of,
Counselor Johnston, just so I,
yep,
you're amending and you're adding accessory dwelling units in the GB as a conditional
as a permitted,
permitted.
all
okay.
right.
And then the units, multifamily units greater than 8 in the GB as permitted,
Conditional.
conditional. I mixed those up, had them backwards. So I wanted to make sure, clear on that. Please continue.
Well, I need a second.
Second.
Okay. So again, for those who aren't familiar with the general business zone, it is one side of Elm Street, the, I guess, left-hand side if you're coming from Biddeford. It runs down Elm Street, up Scammon Street, it encompasses Shaw's Plaza, and a small segment of the properties across from Elm Street. It's relatively small. Obviously, I mean, for transparency purposes, I live across the street. But this is an instance I look at and say, here we are saying, not in my backyard, and I'm here, again, yelling, certainly in my front yard, backyard. The current zoning does not allow more than 8 units in this zone. It makes no sense to me at all. You have several vacant properties that could be repurposed for, again, affordable housing, senior housing, just housing in general, that I would more than welcome to the neighborhood. You look at the plaza there, it's a lot of acreage, and it's probably not appropriately used, or at least not maximized to what it could be. So I view this as an opportunity to, I think, just correct an oversight that I'm actually kind of shocked I didn't recognize during the ZOR's process. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the amendment only now. The amendment is to allow accessory dwelling units in the general business area as permitted and allow multifamily units greater than 8 in the general business as conditional. Councilor Purdy.
Never mind.
On the amendment only, any discussion, Councilor Berman?
Yeah, and sorry, I'm a little just thought through on this. So these are really maybe for the city planner. I think Councilor Johnson's intent is to allow ADUs for single-family houses that already exist in that district. Would making them a permitted use accomplish that? I guess is question one. And question two is, I see that multifamily residential projects up to 8 units are already allowed in the GB. Is there a reason or rationale why larger projects weren't allowed there?
In response to the first question, the permitted status would just allow those existing property owners to tap into accessory dwelling units. So that's a good catch. As far as greater than 8 units, I don't know the history of why it was not included in the zoning ordinance revision process as a use in general business.
Yeah, would the planning department have any concerns about what Councilor Johnson is proposing?
I don't have any. I believe that's a growth area and there's sewer connections.
Appreciate it.
Do you have any? No.
Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. I remembered what I was going to ask. Correct me if I'm wrong, but ADUs are essentially permitted as a part of LD 2003, and forgive me, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but basically as let's say it as a right.
Only for a single-family home.
Right, and what we were talking about was the single-family homes in this district anyway, so essentially they would be able to...
No.
No?
Because they would be non-conforming, and you can't enlarge a non-conforming use or building. So basically, because they're non-conforming, they could not have one.
Okay.
By doing this, they could.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion, Councilor Gunn?
Just as a follow-up, why are they exactly not non-conforming, though? Because I'm starting to see maybe why this wasn't permitted eons ago when this was put out, though, as maybe some sort of balance between growth in the neighborhood and not having it go too high or too out. What is the conditions?
I'm sorry about that.
What was preventing, to Councilor Purdy's question, I'm blanking on the terminology here.
A single family would be considered a non-conforming use
Yes,
in that
thank
zone
you.
because it's not on the allowed use table.
I see,
You can't enlarge a non-conforming use.
I see.
So you can't add an accessory dwelling unit because you'd be enlarging it. So this would allow them to do that.
So for practical purposes, it would be an ADU on a multifamily? I mean,
Single family only.
single family only? Okay.
Yep.
And I would just remind council that we have several buildings in the downtown area and greater downtown area that have more than 8 units in it. And again, that kind of conforms with the development plan to build density in your downtown, so, for historical purposes. Any further discussion on the amendment only? Again, the amendment is to add accessory dwelling units in the general business zone as permitted, and add multifamily units greater than 8 in the general business as conditional. Roll call vote, Counsel Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Amendment passes. Back to the main motion now as amended. Main motion now as amended. Any further discussion on the main motion? Seeing no further discussion on the main motion, roll call vote. Counsel Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to action item B, a first reading, commercial property assessed clean energy CPACE ordinance, page 3 in the packet, assigned to Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 22nd, 2023, Efficiency Maine gave council a presentation on the newly adopted Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy CPACE program. After the presentation, council asked to bring this item back for consideration and/or adoption. Saco does have a developer that would like to benefit from this program. However, for a developer to enroll in the program, the municipality must adopt an ordinance. Purpose and authority. Purpose. By and through this ordinance, the City of Saco declares as its public purpose the establishment of a municipal program to enable its citizens to participate in a commercial property assessed clean energy, or CPACE, program, so that owners of qualifying properties can access financing for energy savings improvements to their commercial properties located in the city. The city declares its purpose and the provisions of this ordinance to be in conformity with federal and state laws. Enabling legislation. The city enacts this ordinance pursuant to Public Law 2021, Chapter 142 of the 130th Maine State Legislature, an act to allow for the establishment of Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, also known as the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Act, or the Commercial PACE Act, codified as 35 AMRS subsection 10201, as amended. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the first reading and set a public hearing date for Monday, October 16th, 2023, on the request to adopt a City of Saco Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy CPACE ordinance. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? No discussion. Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That completes action items and brings us to item 10 under new business. We have item A, which is a follow up from a 2021 agenda item, Ecology School Business Partnership Initiative, BPI for a left-hand turn lane on page 10 in your packet. And we're going to hear from Public Works Director Fox.
Good evening. This item's been discussed and before you a number of times, so I'm not going to run through all of the history. I'll be able to answer questions or provide more detail for whenever you choose to bring this to a vote on a future agenda. But we do know that a requirement of the Ecology School approval of their facility on Simpson Road was to construct a left turn lane from Route 112. Council directive in 21 was, and I do agree with an earlier comment that I'm not sure the minutes captured all of the full discussion. There was a lot of, I do believe it was to pursue or look into, however you want to look at that, the BPI program. A lot of discussion surrounded what state funding opportunities the city had, and BPI was one that arrived at a potential for this project. What is not in your draft item commentary that I will add is the March 2022 meeting, which didn't really change anything, but there was discussion. I went back and watched the video today. There was a tabling of this. To be honest, the previous city administrator, previous planner, and previous economic development directors have all been staff leads on this. So while I was drafting this, I did speak at the March 22nd meeting, but some of these issues just blend together. So I'll correct that, put it in there, and what it does mean is you'll probably need to take it off the table. It's been tabled since March of 22. There was no directive of when to bring that back, but I'll consult with city attorney if needed to see if that has to be your first action should you bring this to a council meeting for vote. Big thing I have reiterated whenever I have spoken about this is the most important thing to consider before any possible BPI application is the sub-agreement between the City of Saco and the Ecology School. So whatever avenue this goes, as soon as, if you make a decision to submit an application for state funding, the only entity on the hook for that agreement with the state is the City of Saco. So the sub-agreement that we have between the city and the Ecology School is a very important document as far as costs and project administration, liabilities, future change order potential to the project, design, permitting, and implementation. All of that has to be covered in what you see as a draft of such agreement. It's only a few pages long, but the big section that's missing is an option for cost and project administration. What I did was I took that section and gave you some options. I could think of 4, so I provided them. They range from, and I'll just briefly, I won't say them word for word, they're in the packet, but there is the ability for the city to apply for a BPI to allow the Ecology School to leverage state funds through that program if we're selected. And the sub-agreement could then put all remaining costs besides the 1/3 or whatever capped amount the state chooses to bring to the table. The rest of the costs would be passed on to the ecology school along with administering the project through a professional engineer. The more traditional route for most BPIs, and the one that the city has done out along the Route 1 corridor, would be city, the sub-applicant, the ecology school, and Maine DOT each share 1/3 of the project costs. DOT will typically cap that at whatever the preliminary engineered estimate is, or whatever they have remaining in that program. So you could do a $900,000 project and have $300,000 each, or you could get an agreement back from the state that says the state only has 100 or 200 left to put into it, and then again, you revert back to your sub-agreement to decide how you split the rest of the cost between the ecology school and the city. So that would be an option where everything is capped from the city and whatever the state provides, and the ecology school has the rest, including any change orders that might come up during final design and construction. There's another option here where the city truly enters into a partnership across the board with the ecology school and submits this application and splits all costs above whatever the state provides fully. At that point, the city would be enough of a partner that I would probably say, if you choose that one, at some point the administering of this project becomes pretty heavily city dollars and city involvement. So you would be looking at city staff or our engineering consultants potentially being involved, because we are the ones who have to submit all of the paperwork and guarantees back to the state either way. So at some point there is a tipping point of funding that I think would require more staff resources and effort. And then the last one is simply the city may choose to not submit a BPI application. So next steps for staff are really hinging on picking one of these 4 options. The draft agreement that's before you has been agreed to in principle. It's been reviewed by the city attorney. The ecology school has seen it and reviewed and understands the agreement. They likely would have another round of reviewing that on their end with their board, I'm sure. And depending on which option you pick, there may be a couple clarifying clauses we need to put in just to strengthen the project administration and cost-sharing piece of this. But if there is anything else, the one other clarifying thing, I do believe that the steps of this, unless you choose to do differently, would be bring this back before you with these options. Obviously, I'm not looking for you to pick any of them tonight. Just want to know if you need more clarifying language in the actual voting document. But I think this would authorize the city and the staff to move forward and submit a BPI if that's what you choose. However, the next piece of this would be a budget amendment, because these funds, there are no funds for that turn lane allocated or specified in our existing budget. So I look at that as 2 separate steps, since we don't know what the state would come back with A, do we get approved for a BPI? And B, do they have a cap, or are they truly covering 1/3 of what is now projected to be 900? And I put that number in there for you, but I might take a minute. 900 and I don't want to say it wrong. I thought it was on the 925. 945? Okay. 924,700. Thank you. I couldn't find it on that sheet. So if that's what got submitted, which is the latest, so the ecology school has updated, the figure that's included is from August of 22, but they updated the cost to produce or construct what is shown in that figure just a week ago. So those are current cost estimates, and they do have contingency based in them. So open to questions or comments or anything you'd like to see in your voting document.
Thank you. So council, just as an update, this is only an update. There's no voting tonight. And furthermore, we actually have to get clarification, because procedurally, I think once an item is tabled and it's not picked up at the next session, or a time actually given in the tabling motion, the item is dead and therefore cannot come up until your next council, which will be installed in December. So we are going to get a legal opinion on that, just to make sure we're following the rules, and parliamentary procedure appropriately, but just so you know, this is just an update and an opportunity for staff to get some information in case you want to look at something down the road. So therefore, there's where we are. Councilor Archer, then Councilor Purdy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Falk, I'd like to see some kind of movement going on. So what it is, I don't know what it is yet until we actually bring it on the floor, if we can, or if it would have to be under next year, or someone makes a motion to set aside the rule. But I kind of wanted to just understand is your understanding of BPI, and I'm just going to your best guess. BPI is, what is your, not your confidence level, but what is the confidence level, because it's a grant, that's what we're asking for. Grants get applied for, they get denied all the time, we do it all the time. BPIs, do you have an understanding of like the confidence level and how these get approved? And then my second question is, if the state denies it, what is the backup plan?
I'm not going to speculate as to what group sits in what room and chooses which BPIs at the state level. We've only done one, so it's not like the MPIs where I have a pretty good idea because we've administered a lot of them. And I don't know, I certainly don't want to sit here and speculate because I don't know, but I also don't want to say that this is a good or bad candidate. If we're choosing to submit it, I certainly don't want to speak as a city representative to say this is or is not a quality application of a project. So I really don't have anything to offer on that.
Because there's no guarantee with this BPI. It's not like we approve it, we send it to the state, and they're like, oh, Saco said, let's do it, and they join on board. It's really we're a grant applicant, and it's hit or miss if we meet what their vision is.
Yeah, I've had state program applications that we've utilized funds where we simply got one because there were no other applicants and they had money available. And we've had other ones where it got very competitive because it was, I mean, they're distributing those funds for sort of different needs. There's not like one set, it's not a very specific project criteria. I mean, it can be addressed, it can address a lot of transportation needs and it can address 10% of them or up to a third. So I think it's administered a lot of different ways and I don't have really anything more to provide than that.
But there's nothing we can do until we start moving forward.
Until
Legislative.
we apply, we won't know if where this project scores or ranks within their system, no.
Thank you.
Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. I think you answered my first question. You said you've only done one BPI.
It's not even complete. The only one I'm aware of the city has done, I don't know how long the BPI program has been in existence of the state level. The only one I've heard of in my 18-plus years is the Flag Pond Road, Hancock Lumber, traffic signal BPI.
Right, yeah, that was my question. I was just, I seem to remember, whether it was a BPI or another program, I just seem to remember some conversation that the state, I don't know, capped how many programs you could be involved in at one point in time, but obviously it wasn't a BPI, maybe it was one of the other programs that we may have
The
applied
MPI,
for.
the longer term one, the one that we've done more of, I have made statements in the past that we have a number of projects in the queue that we sort of target MPI funds for. BPI, we have to be working with some third-party entity. I know of no other projects that are in the queue for that funding program, so I'm not gonna say we could use these funds for something else. I don't see any other pending Saco. If you choose to apply for it, it's not like there's another Saco BPI in the pipeline that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing is just really a request. Excuse me, if this does come up within the next couple of months, back to an action item, I'd just request that the original contract zone and any subsequent, there'd be links in the packet, to the original contract zone and any subsequent modifications.
So contract zone approval links or the planning board minutes from approvals.
Yeah, or at least the original contract zone and any subsequent amendments to it, just really just for ease of finding the information.
Yep, okay.
Counselor Berman? Oh,
No.
excuse me. Counselor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Counselor Archer. I'd like to see some progress on this if at all possible. It's been hanging out there for a long time. Do we know when the last time a traffic study was done and what the current needs are?
The sub-applicant could probably speak more about it. I do know that they, since the last time this was before you, they've switched to Sebago Technics, providing design and traffic support, both civil design of the improvement and then also their traffic division looking at. So they did do updated analysis and counts in August of 2023.
Yeah, so I guess I'd like some sense of what the current traffic level is and how much of that is driven by the ecology school traffic and what the cities and residents' needs would be even absent the ecology school traffic, if we could understand if the city may have its own interest in that left turn lane.
I could reach out. Like I said, I know that they produced something. Are you saying you'd like to see whatever it is that they have for updated traffic data, or are you looking for them?
That'd be great.
Or are you looking for them to do something new related to traffic analysis?
If there's a relatively current traffic analysis, that would be great to have provided to us.
Okay.
And then some sense of what action would be required based on that traffic pattern by the city.
Counselor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I would also echo the sentiments of trying to move this forward. It's been lingering here for a while, and I think we need to get this resolved as soon as we can. Two questions for you, Pat, if you could just educate me a little bit here. Is this arrangement that you described to me where the state enters into an agreement with the city, and then the city gets a sub-agreement with the developer, if you will? Is that the common flow of the document?
Common, as in the one that the city of Saco has done, involved both of those.
Is that how that one was set up?
Yeah, if you look through the state agreement, it's very short. It just basically says the city will certify that all of this was done, and it was all the city will with DOT. So therefore, the sub-agreement with Hancock or the sub-agreement with the ecology school would turn around and say, the ecology school will, whatever we don't want to be on the, on the hook for, or the only party involved with the state.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then,
I do want to clarify one thing back to, you said something about after providing whatever traffic analysis they have done, you also said something about the city's view of it or something. Now, I just want to be clear, if they are doing additional traffic studies or counts or anything, the city is not analyzing those because there's no step that would require the city to. So if you're asking for a city review, that would be something that does, I wouldn't be reviewing that there's no action step besides this turn lane project, so.
I see. Yeah, I guess my question is whether traffic patterns have changed such that even in the absence of ecology school traffic, if the city would install a left turn lane on its own or have any interest in doing so. I'm trying to get at that sense.
So just for a clarification, we do have quarterly traffic monitoring reports that the city receives. We can send those along as well. We've provided them to the planning board. It's an interim step that ecology school is monitoring traffic in certain quarters. They have to do at least quarterly. So we have those that we can provide. I don't think they're going to get directly at what you're looking at, but they are a little more recent as well. So we can certainly include those in the packet going forward.
Any information would be helpful. Thank you.
Counselor Hatch, did you have a follow-up?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Doyle. And then just another point of clarification. If the option we select is that the city does not assist in any funding, I just want to be clear in my head if there would be any normal costs of monitoring that we would incur even if this was being done by another developer. For example, building to spec, inspections, those kinds of things. And is that a cost burden to the city that should be reimbursed, or is it something we normally absorb?
I think I can handle this one, but Emily will correct me if I'm wrong. So any developer, until they complete all of the requirements, on or off-site are going to maintain a letter of credit with the city. So city draws on that for inspections, reviews, or ultimately to help, we very rarely get to that point, but to help accomplish whatever it was that was set forth in the requirement. So there is a letter of credit related to this that would be drawn from in that case of us just monitoring an off-site improvement like we typically do.
Any further questions? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So, Director Fox, this is a state road, correct?
Correct.
Are there any studies that the state has done that has indicated the need for this in the past, or?
To the best of my knowledge, no, and I don't think that it's anything they would analyze from, DOT wouldn't have a reason to look at this. They might update counts, they might work within programs with the municipality if there's high crash locations through a municipality, but I can't think of anything that would trigger DOT to review whether a turn lane was needed for Simpson Road. They reconstructed the road fully back probably 10 to 15 years ago now.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that there's not data out there that suggests otherwise. And then the other question I have is, in the update, it indicates that presently this would occur within the existing right-of-way. That's what has been submitted, at least by this applicant. Has staff reviewed that, and can they give any level of certainty that property acquisition wouldn't be needed?
I can't give you a guarantee without final design. So, I mean, the conceptual design has worked hard to, I believe it's actually called option 2. Like it's the active sheet we have. There's not a complex set of drawings or survey. But I believe option 1 did involve right-of-way, but may have been, my recollection is option 1 could have been slightly cheaper, but definitely involved right-of-way, whereas option 2 might have had to extend further down the road to get alignment or something, but was purposely intended to stay within the existing right-of-way. Likely, hopefully option 2 in final survey and layout and design can meet what this concept shows. If anything, I would say you'd be looking at grading easements, so the back side of improvements or ditches that are filled in and piped or something like that often requires just a temporary grading easement onto private property so that the transition isn't some awkward 1-foot lift in your lawn or something. But as far as we know right now, this does not involve any permanent takings or purchasing of land.
Okay. Again, along the same lines, in your professional opinion, is there potential for I envision a construction project, there's usually large staging areas and whatnot, and that potentially could be staged on private property from what I've seen in the past. My concern here is I've heard from the very few people that live on that corner that they want nothing to do with any part of this. So I think that's a hurdle, that we have before us in the future.
Contractors typically have to find their own right-of-way, their own laydown yard. It is likely private property, and they make whatever arrangements they agree to with a private property owner to put equipment and materials as close to a project site as they can. But sometimes in the downtown area, they could still be several miles away. So I expect that could be the case out there as well. They just factor it into their bidding and costs of the project.
Any further questions? So you will not see this on the October 2nd agenda. We might bring it forward after we get a legal opinion. Okay, moving on to item 10B, which is an informational update on a transportation master plan and impact fee study on page 17 in your packet. Councilor Berman, you are the assigned liaison. Would you like to remain the assigned liaison?
Yes, please.
Okay, and now we're going to get a presentation from Director Fox and Planner Prescott. Cole Prescott, excuse me.
Emily's taking on tech. That should cut a half hour out of this if I were doing it. So, get started a little bit of background. If you remember back to the last budget, we got into a lot of capital discussion about where is the appropriate and what growth assets should we be adding related to vehicles, bike, and pedestrians. We have, in last year's budget, you funded a significant amount of money to go towards a study of exactly that. Also in the works and discussed at the city staff level for a long time was having to revamp the impact fee system utilized by planning to make that more robust and cover more projects versus what some of our current fees allow right now. So it's an exciting study. We've brought it to planning board. We're meeting with you tonight about it, and we'll be meeting Wednesday night with the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So really some exciting options here for Saco looking forward. It's a very complex study, but I'm going to walk through the components now, and if there's anything we have not gone out to, we're forming our RFP to put this out, and we just want as much feedback as we can. So I will not read every slide in its entirety, but I think this one's important. The purpose of this study is to identify current and future transportation improvement needs necessary to accommodate safe vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle mobility as the community grows. The goal is to create a fair, clear, and transparent impact fee system so the city can collect equitable fees to fund these planned corridor improvements. Sounds like a good goal, doesn't it? Yeah. I think we can all buy into that as a community. So existing conditions, these are some of the things that are included in the scope and what we're looking for, and this could likely be a team. This is larger than the smaller corridor studies. I mean, this is citywide. I can't honestly tell you what some of the costs are that we'll get back in this bid process and how we may have to refine this study as we award a contract. But existing conditions, we're great at. We have a great collection of what our assets are. We shouldn't have to spend a lot of money or time there. Project lists for replacing, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of assets. We're really good at telling you, helping you understand which ones should be replaced when from just a purely asset management perspective of existing infrastructure. Where we kind of fail to lay out a roadmap for you to help you make decisions because we just haven't undergone this step ever is where do we spend the dollars in growth of our infrastructure? So that's what we've never done a comprehensive process. Think of the comp plan boiled down to simply transportation improvements or dovetailed into transportation improvements. We're looking to get a prioritized list of improvements for all modes of transportation across the city and a funding profile. So if we can identify 20 years worth of projects and that costs $20 million, $40 million, $60 million, we need to decide what do we want to capture in fees as we grow, and that'll shape the impact fee system that we'll put together as part of this study, and what's going to be captured by TIFs, general fund, all our different funding mechanism opportunities. So we're looking to get a lot out of this study, and we're looking forward to provide a roadmap for the next 10 to 20 years of infrastructure improvements attached to growth. Anticipated timeline of this right now would be to release an RFP sometime in October, early November at the latest. And studies that we've found, these are very common in other areas of the country. Washington State had several quality plans like this. I don't know if it's just built into a little bit more of their sort of business model or anticipated, just like we do comprehensive plans, they seem to do these on a regular basis. So I think a year for what we're asking for between data collection and seeing it through the process is about as fast as we can go. Some other feedback has been, I wish we could have it now, and trust me, so do I, but we don't. So it'll take about a year to put something this robust together. I'm going to let Emily talk through a little bit of the phasing and public engagement aspects of this as well.
So like Pat said, we're looking at doing almost a mini comprehensive plan dedicated to transportation and the impact fee study for that. So We broke this down into different phases that you'll see when the RFP is released. A breakdown of those is phase 1. We'll look at data collection and review of our previous studies so that we're constantly building off of work that the city has previously done. Phase 2 is a transportation master planning, which will look at those project prioritizations, and it will also request that the consultants who respond to us do a growth consideration and projection process. And phase 3 will be the impact fee study portion, as well as building these recommendations from the project prioritization in phase 1 and phase 2 into the capital planning recommendations. And along the way, we're going to have public engagement. So we're going to be asking the RFP respondents to provide information on what they propose for public engagement to make sure that we're running it, like Pat said, similar to mini comp plans. So there'll be opportunities all throughout the process to through key decision points to give input. And as I said, we're building off of previous studies. I also am often asked how we're going to use studies in the future. Certainly, we're not going to shelve it. These are the different ways that a study like this will be used. Data-driven prioritization for looking at expanding the transportation system. We'll have one thing that's really important is when you look at grant funding, a lot of grants will want shovel-ready projects. So if we have a study like this that has already identified and prioritized projects, we can show that it has community support and is higher on the funding level for those grant programs and proposals. Like Pat said, building it into the capital planning software and budget process so you get a really good, clean idea for what you need to fund going forward. And growth impact fees. Some of our traffic movement permits now, they actually, developers in Saco pay traffic impact fees into Scarborough on one of our larger traffic movement permits. We don't have any mechanism to do that right now, so we're also going to be looking into that as part of this process. And then when private developers come and ask questions about what type of traffic impact fees they'll pay, unless it's in a specific corridor of the city, it's not really well defined. So this will help us to define that and be much more clear and upfront when we're asked. We just don't have the data right now to give answers until we get farther into the planning board review process. So this will be very helpful. And happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Berman.
Not so much a question, I don't think, just a general statement of enthusiasm. I think this is a great idea, long overdue. Really excited we're undertaking it now and really excited to see the results.
Councilor Hatch.
I would echo those sentiments. I would just, it's probably buried in there someplace, but it's my understanding that we do take fees in lieu of development, like sidewalks or whatever, and making sure that that process is equally well defined. I think that we need a serious level of engineering influence in that final outcome, and with all due respect, not leave it up to the planning board to negotiate, that we have a fairly, clear process as to how we get to that number. So it's likely buried in there someplace, but I just want to get on record to ask that we pay some attention to that. Thank you.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you're still developing it, but when I was thinking in terms of the committee and to help mitigate siloing, maybe instead of having a separate committee, it's actually a subcommittee of the LRPC. That way they can transcend up and down rather than having a separate group, even though I do encourage that. Just in this aspect is how does it transcend back and forth? That way we're not going in different directions. And I was just thinking when you get to those considerations, maybe it's best to utilize what we already have in more of a subcommittee, but still public engagement, obviously, approach.
Councilor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pat, last week at the planning board, I know you touched on this, though, and for the public's benefit who didn't listen in, could you speak a little bit more to sort of what the matrix would be in terms of weighing projects? And I'm going to use as an easy example, one that's in everybody's mind, sidewalks, since the debate we had last year, or actually I guess it was earlier this year, vis-a-vis Ward 4. So in terms of identifying and then prioritizing, how would the program, or at least how you envision it to be?
That's, yeah, great point. Some of the best plans we saw as we were researching plans like this from around the country to help put together the RFP and sort of form our vision of what the final product and deliverable actually is so for each asset group. So if you want to, if the goal, as a community, we set a goal of expanding sidewalk to, and it's a specific distance from certain services, or is it every street, whatever it might be, that then forms, and then you go a step further and you say, okay, what's important to us? It's important that we have sidewalks on every street over 35 miles an hour that has more than 4,000 cars a day. So all these data points help form the decision. So it's data-based decision-making on which sidewalk ranks the highest and comes next. Not to say that if development changes, you can't shift the scoring matrix, but with what we have today and where traffic is today, some of the best plans laid out a very clear scoring before you had any road names involved. So before we're talking about my neighborhood or your neighborhood or anything, you establish the criteria that says, here's how we're going to score. Score goes up if you're affecting safety, a high crash location, travel volumes over a certain amount, or a certain distance from a school. So they had a different scoring matrix for every bike lane, pedestrian improvement, traffic signalization changes, or modernization. And then you just run all your improvements and growth scenarios through this scoring matrix, and it really starts to spit out some really quantifiable projects that I think everyone can buy into because we made those decisions of what's important before we were talking about our street. So I think that was a powerful part of the plan, so thank you.
So as a follow-up, so just as a matter of practicality, once this is invoked or in force, say city planner, public works would come in front of the council once a year and say, the matrix has declared based on your priorities that you should have a sidewalk here, and this here, and here's the funding mechanism. And it basically would be more of your professional recommendation as opposed to us having sort of a political debate over the priorities of one versus the other, because as you said, this is what we're trying to aim to avoid, but we're still dealing with people and still dealing with interests. So how do we overcome that? Is it just pretty much, sort of like when finance department comes and says, look, this is the law, you got to do this. We're all pretty much, oh, yeah, well, we got to do that. I think having that approach, obviously, in terms of our internal improvements when it comes to transportation might be obviously the best if we can get it to that.
Yeah.
Or is that being kind of too pie in the sky?
No, I think any list for improvements we put together, we're a large city with a lot of needs and a lot of moving pieces, and we try to serve the most people we can with every decision we make. But it will always be, and some people might take this the wrong way, but I'm going to say it anyway because I do consider it really important. It's still a mix of art and science. Not all of the improvements that we can make can ever be laid out 20 years in advance, and we just do them in that order. I wish it was that simple. It's not. There's always other aspects. You might not replace, a sidewalk may rank high, but if all of the utilities underneath it are worth millions of dollars and failing, then you might have to move on to a different sidewalk first. So, and that's okay, but those decisions, that's why we're going to continue to put a 5-year capital plan in front of you, showing what the future is. And as the growth areas change, or some areas just get developed faster than others, then those projects might rise to the top quicker. But we'll have a lot more data available to put those before you in an independent way that everyone can buy into.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is exciting. This is something I've personally desired since my first term on council, really prior to that, having read comp plans and always wondered why it had very specific language and nothing ever happened with it. And obviously financing things are a big part of that, but it's also everybody pointing in which direction and demands coming from every which direction. This hopefully will, clean this up and give us all direction, including planning board when they have projects before them with an understanding of this is how we're going to prioritize things, staff, council. I mean, like I said, it's exciting from where I sit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, discussion? Thank you very much. That concludes that brings us to item C of new business, and that is budget amendment number 2, the Transportation Center Custodial and Security Contracted Services on page 18 in your packet. Councilor Johnston, if this is something the council is interested in, do you want to be the liaison as it's in your ward? Thank you. And Director Fox, please update us with the Transportation Center Custodial and Security Contracted Services.
Okay, still me. 3 very different items before you tonight, but so this is a proposed budget amendment that I think we've touched on in the past, the need of this. The use of the transportation center, the publicly accessible spaces have changed a lot over the last few years. Staff availability to address the current public use of the transportation center is limited, and I specifically related to custodial and security-related calls for service. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of different sort of desires being met by the facility at this time. It is open 16 hours a day with no staffing. That does not exist at other stations up and down the Amtrak line. Security and custodial of public spaces in surrounding communities has changed, and maybe that's increasing some of the trips we're seeing through the facility, but we just simply can't keep up with expectations for cleanliness and secure, safe places for the traveling, for people using train and bus, which is the intention of the facility and the primary use of the facility. So we have gotten quotes on custodial contracts and private security. They range considerably. What we've put before you is not going to get security at the facility every hour it's open. It's simply going to try to leverage other private security companies that are working through a public bid process to just get a little bit more presence at the facility. I heard some comment about other services from the public that could be provided there, perhaps. I don't think there is not room for providing those services within what I've put before you for some cost estimates. We're simply just trying to improve conditions and then make operational changes so that hopefully this budget amendment doesn't carry forward at the full. What you'll have before you, if it goes forward, unless we change it tonight with some comment and discussion, is each set of contracts, custodial and security, could cost anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, depending on how many days we're asking for and how many hours and what we get back for bids. So I just estimated each at $50,000 and then prorated it for the rest of this fiscal year, which is how we ended up at about $67,000. We would go out to bid. We have also met with, in the time that we were drafting this, met with NEPRA, talked to Amtrak. Really, most of our Amtrak involvement goes through NEPRA. I've talked to Chad, the executive director at BZUB Transit, about some of the operational changes we could explore there and what they see from their customer bases and what might help improve it as a city facility and address these things as well. So those could be a combination of hour reductions. Both entities were okay with that and understood, and it happens at other facilities up and down the transit line, that some of the early and late trains don't have the building open. Parking in the lower parking lot could move to paid parking. There were some questions in the agreement that we have about providing parking for Amtrak users. If we could do that, we got clarification that we can, so there's a future offsetting revenue to help cover some of these. But I think the need for this is overdue, and we'd like to get these contracts out as soon as we can to help clean the facility up and just change the feel of it the way it is right now, heading into the winter.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions or potentially adjust the budget amendment request if it's not clear.
Any questions? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I understand, we got to take baby steps here, and I appreciate that. But I do think, given the public testimony this evening about the integration of some social service element would be worthwhile, at least keeping on our radar screen. And I recognize that that might likely impact the cost of the process. But I think that was a really good suggestion that we ought to just kind of keep in mind. The other thing is whether or not, and I guess this is a general TIF question, the transportation TIF, is that Is it possible to use any of that funding for this purpose? And that's a question you don't have to answer, I just...
I can.
Okay.
I sought that out. I always seek out that as a potential first funding, or at least
Good
well
for you.
before the general fund. So the custodial and security will not be eligible for that. However, in our follow-up meetings with NEPRA, we did learn of a program that they've started to help with station improvements up and down the line, where some of the stuff that we're spending money on now would be eligible to submit for reimbursement, potentially through NEPRA and Amtrak. So that was another nice offsetting revenue, though not direct funding of this, would certainly reduce some of our other annual costs. And some of the social service stuff, I'm not going to speak to, it'd be well outside my realm or anything, but there has been some done through this chief's department. So maybe he can update you if you'd like.
Chief Clements, do you want to address the item that was brought up by Councilor Hatch?
Sure. So the City of Saco Police Department does have a licensed clinical social worker. She does spend time down there. In addition, the Director Salas applied for, in conjunction with the police department, a grant to hire another social worker, as well as get some vehicles for him. We're waiting to hear back on that. So we are looking to bolster that and have those folks available, not just at the train station, but the entire city.
Kudos, that's great.
Thank you very much. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, Chief Clements really previewed my question, but just to add some support that the grant is great. If it doesn't come through, perhaps this is a collaboration that could come back as part of next year's budget. I think these services are really important.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just more of a comment, just a topic that I'm aware of. Pre-COVID, we used to have a lot of people with low intellectually disabled, people with intellectual disabilities, and they would use that as a hangout during the daytime, and I was completely fine with that. I would just want to make sure that when we start instituting some rules, that we're still cognizant that it's still a public space, that we're not trying to push people out, especially if they're using it in the manner that is considered appropriate. So again, it's not to shoo people away, it's just to make sure that it's a safe environment for anybody who wants to use it. That's my intent of having security on site, not to necessarily say, oh, you've been here for 2 hours, you need to move on. So.
No, I think it's a delicate topic, but I think staff recognizes, I mean, it's a beautiful public space. We just want to keep it beautiful and usable for all of Saco's residents and visitors, and we're certainly not trying to create no one involved in any of the conversations I've been in is trying to create an environment that is not welcoming to all people that want to be there. And the reduction of hours, we feel like in talking to all of the user groups and constituents that use the facility, the reduction in hours is probably not going to, if we do head that way as well, it would still be a good, 8 to 12 hours open 7 days a week. So it shouldn't impact like people going there for a few hours in the day or meeting people there. Yeah.
Thank you. If there's no objection, this will be on the October 2nd agenda. With no objections, we'll have it on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Yep.
That concludes new business and brings us to item 11, administrative update. City Administrator Duras.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to announce that the City of Saco has been awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from the Government Finance Officers Association for the current fiscal period. This is the 5th year in a row that the City of Saco has received this award. The award reflects the commitment of the City of Saco and staff to meeting the highest principles of governmental budgeting. Congratulations go out to the finance staff, Glennis Salas, our Director of Budget and Fiscal Analysis, for receiving a certificate of recognition for budget presentations and her outstanding work in achieving this award. As a reminder, on Thursday, we will be having our annual employee appreciation. The event will be held at the Public Works Department between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. City offices will be closed during that time to allow customer-facing employees the opportunity to participate. We appreciate your understanding. Upcoming agendas for next week, October 2nd, public hearing City Code, Chapter 102, Fire Prevention revisions, public hearing, amendments to Chapter 15, unassigned fund balance, policy updates. First reading, budget amendment number 2, Transportation Center and Custodial and Security Contracted Services. One reading for the donation of Clark's Hill, and we'll have an update from Saco Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? That brings us to item 12, council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. Forgive me, I'm not very good at speaking off the cuff here, and I've been struggling to organize my thoughts all night since public comment. So let me start out by saying, number one, I recognize the right by both the state law and the city charter of citizens to file a grievance. Number two, let me say that I recognize the importance of that being heard by your elected officials. So everybody sitting at this table has sworn an oath to uphold the city's charter, state constitution, and the Constitution of the United States. Not something I don't think any one of us took lightly. So there's one section in the charter which was actually referenced in the grievance, stating that does a decision or action put the city in a compromised legal position? I said there's a section in the charter that references, does a decision or an action put the city in a compromised legal position? So while it's your right to accuse whoever of endemic corruption, might I suggest that looking at this from all angles, that because of some of the sensitive nature of some of this public grievance that's coming to the meeting tomorrow, that erring on the side of caution, in erring on the side of caution, a decision to not put that in the packet was simply that of, and I don't know whose decision it was. I'm not involved in those decisions, okay? I'm a counselor from Ward 2. But might I suggest that possibly that decision was made to protect the city and not put it in a compromised legal position? So, let's take a look at things from all angles. I know I try to look at things from all angles when I'm sitting here and having to make a decision. I would appreciate those same actions by folks who have a grievance. Please look at the entire picture. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further council discussion and comment? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So I missed my opportunity earlier with committee correspondence. It's slipped my mind, but there is one thing I certainly want to make council aware of. And again, I wish I had said this earlier because we did have members of Ward 4 here, so hopefully they're still listening. And so I'm directing this to the counselor from Ward 4. Traffic safety met last Thursday night. We discussed several items. I think overall we made a good effort towards making some well-needed pedestrian improvements. One of the items, as you are aware, Councilor Berman, was the request to add flashing beacons or bollards to the Ferry Road Bayview intersection, that crosswalk there. We had discussion about that, and ultimately we decided, or the committee decided, that instead of the flashing beacons, we are going to install, or the city, when they get around to it, will install a three-way stop, which, not that we install stop signs for the purpose of stopping or slowing down traffic, but it may have that residual effect while also making people that drive that corridor more heightened to the fact that there are people there. And so I wanted to share that with council, but also you in particular, since it's going to change that pattern. And I'm sure some people will be upset about it, but overall, I think it makes sense and probably is long overdue, just given how, particularly as you come around that turn, people just seem to fly right through there, and hopefully a stop sign will, again, make people aware that there's a lot of walkers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. Much needed for safety. I'm sure the neighborhood in general will appreciate that change. Thank you.
Moving on to item 13. Is there a motion for executive session? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be it ordered that City Council entering into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Subsection 4056, A, personnel matter, E, consultation between municipality and its attorney.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call to enter executive session. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 8:44. We will take a 5-minute recess, but the executive session will be in the City Administrator's Conference Room. City Administrator's Conference Room. Recess for 5 minutes. Okay, greetings and welcome back from executive session. I'll entertain a motion to exit executive session.
So moved.
Counselor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Counselor McPhail, any discussion? Roll call to exit. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to exit executive session at 10:08 p.m. Item 14, report from executive session. Counselor Johnston?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to read this slow and clearly for everyone. Making a motion to establish the order of business for the City Council meeting on Tuesday, 9/26/2023 at 6:30 p.m. Will be a limited agenda to include a call to order, a recognition of members present, the Pledge of Allegiance. It will then move to action items, which will be the receipt of citizens' grievance petition. Council will then adjourn. At the conclusion of the City Council meeting, the Council will allow the Section 8.01 general meeting of the citizens to take place. The city will work to make the audio in the City Council chambers available for the public meeting. The City of Saco and the Saco City Council have no official role in this meeting other than allowing the citizens' public meeting space. The city will not be recording or broadcasting the general meeting. However, the city clerk, as required, will be present to take minutes.
Motion's been made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion?
Did you want to say anything about the time limits? I should have brought that up.
Thank you. Counselor Johnston, do you want to speak on the time limits in your motion and amend your motion?
Well, I think we had determined that our past procedures is nothing past 9:30, so I would amend to include the 9:30 time limit. And again, if the proceeding needs to go beyond that, the public can, of course, postpone or take up their meeting in the future.
Counselor Berman, are you agreeable to the friendly amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll second that amendment.
Thank you. Okay. With that, any discussion? Counselor Johnston, you had your hand up. I apologize.
I partly forget what I was going to say. I think I was just going to, for the benefit of the public, to let them know that this is after, we've arrived at this conclusion after several legal opinions, and I think the majority of council here agrees this is the best path forward to satisfy the requirement of the charter.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Why don't we take the amendment first and go on that? On the amendment, Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Amendment passes 7-0. Back to the main motion now as amended with the time frame of 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m., or maybe not a starting point, but the ending point being 9:30 p.m. With that, any further discussion on the main motion now as amended? Counselor Archer?
I don't believe it was said, but the ability, there can be a continuance.
That's,
So
yes,
it ends at
Counselor-
9:30, and then we can be continued if needed.
Counselor Johnston did make that into the record, that, you know, if it continues to go over, it can be picked up at a later date. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
That motion passes 7-0. That concludes the report from executive session, and therefore, item 15, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Counselor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Counselor Berman, any discussion? Roll call to adjourn. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn at 10:12 p.m. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.